Testing.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
How's my video? Is it really slow or is it okay? I'm gonna have to
Do something. Dance.
Dudes to Dads is a podcast to help men understand and navigate the transition of being a single dude into a family man. How do we make sense of it all? Well, we probably won't be able to, but let's go ahead and have some fun trying. All right, welcome to another episode of Dudes to Dads. Tonight's topic, Alan.
Yes, you are Jason.
Well, I'm Jason Kreidman.
And I'm Alan Bush.
But tonight's topic, how can dads communicate with their kids?
Right.
We are live on Blab again. This time it's a little bit different setup than we did last time. Last time I was looking at one screen, looking at another screen, and trying to look at you because Alan is in the same room as me.
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, so actually I can't reach. Can I reach?
Can you reach over here? Here, reach through here. That's his hand. Look at that.
There it is.
Through the magic of technology.
So we are on Blab, and thanks for anybody joining us here. We do a weekly podcast. It's called Dudes to Dads, and it's helping the transition from single man into family man, or single dude into family man.
Right.
But like I said, tonight's topic is about communication, and really about how can dads communicate with their kids. And so one of the things I want to start with is that communication starts with listening.
Right.
Imagine that.
I know, right? This is pretty obvious, but a lot of people don't remember that.
So you want to learn how to talk,
right? And
you want to learn how to talk to your kids or your significant other or whoever.
Yeah.
But it starts with listening. Isn't that funny?
Right.
So I was doing some preparation for the show and looking at various things of, how can people communicate? Now, I've got my own ideas as well, but that was one of the things, that comes up first. It's always about, communication. Right. And I would say the overarching theme of all of these tips and suggestions and everything else is that communication with your kids is a two-way discussion. It's not a lecture.
Right.
Doesn't matter what's happening. I mean,
well, that's a good point too. Like, discussion is kind of the key ingredient here,
right?
Because when you're a parent and you're older, you tend to want to you're the parent. I can't speak from experience, but I know speaking to kids, sometimes you tend to want to just tell them what to do, or
right,
so they do what you say, and you really should be engaged with them and communicating with them.
Yeah. So it's important to, first of all, make sure that you're having a discussion and you're not doing a lecture. So that can be even when you're disciplining. Even when you're disciplining and you're trying to teach or something. Yeah. It's important to keep that in mind. So I've got a couple things. This was Dr. Laura Markham.
Okay.
She runs a website called Aha Parenting. I love it. It's got weekly newsletter. She's got some really, really good tips and good suggestions, great articles, an abundance of articles on what to do. And it's ahaparenting.com.
Is she in the area, or?
No, I don't think so. I mean, she's other side of the country, I think.
Oh, gotcha.
But, but just great tips. Somebody else had turned me on to her, and just I love getting the emails. They're always relevant to what I'm going through, or what I'm doing. So one of the things she talked about, there was an article, and I'll put a link to it on our website, dudestodads.com/dads podcast.
Yep.
The first thing you do is, if you want to get your child to listen, is you don't start talking until you have your child's attention.
Right.
Seems pretty...
Yeah. Pretty straightforward.
But remember, on the last podcast, we talked about gems.
Yes.
The genuine encounter moments, which is actually like, getting down to the child's level, making that love or that heart connection with them.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really important. So what I do want to mention too, for those just joining us, we are live on Blab.
Yep.
As well, though, we record, this is a live podcast that we record weekly. So for the podcast listeners, if you're not on the live broadcast, you can reach us at podcast@dudestodads.com.
Yep.
And send us emails, questions, comments. Also, too, for those on Blab, we welcome any questions as we're going. Alan, sort of the producer and technical wizard of the show, will field any of the questions and sort of weave those in as we can, but we're going to try to keep the podcast going. So
yeah.
So after you have your child's attention and you start, you don't start talking until you've done that. You don't want to repeat yourself.
Right.
So if number 2 is don't repeat yourself. So if it's not working and you have to repeat yourself, go back to step 1.
Right. Get their attention.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I am totally guilty of this. Of repeating myself.
Oh,
I mean,
gotcha.
Every parent. It's like, I feel like I have to say it 10 times. It's like, hey, you got to do this, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this, got to, and it's like, I always say, like, bedtime. I'm like to my son, I'm like, we've been doing this for 5 to 7 years. Like every night. Yeah,
but at least 3 of those years I don't remember.
Well, true. Okay, so like, we've been doing it 3 real years, 4 real years. Right. Every night's the same thing. We get on our pajama, or we take a bath, we get on our pajamas, we brush our teeth, we comb our hair. But I mean, it's like, it's the same thing. They just, and so, we make lists and we put things up and we do all kinds of stuff. But if I'm trying to talk to them and they're not listening, it means that I don't have their attention. And I'm not engaging with them.
So you don't think that repeating yourself might be because they either forgot or they want to test your limits?
Well, I'll tell you another. Well, yeah, of course. That's the dynamic of parenting. Right. There's 500 things going on at one time. So the other element is, and I learned this with like toddlers and things, is that it takes them approximately 16 seconds to respond to what you say.
Really?
So in other words, if you said, "Please get out of the bath,"
it hits them 16 seconds later.
It takes them 16.
Really?
It was some statistic like that was just insane. Yeah,
and as they get a little of older, a minute or something.
as they get a little older, the time is reduced. But it was funny because I've tested my kids on this a couple times,
hilarious.
And I've said it, and then I waited, and then they actually did respond. So it's not every time, but it is funny because the problem is with us as parents, we're so impatient. We want it, like, I'm saying this, do it now.
That's hilarious.
That's really, what, it's just something that happens. It's like 16 seconds. So that's something, you've got to slow down when you say, and you're expecting, and you're saying, hey, listen, I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
And they're not paying attention. You might want to give them just a little bit more time. So instead, we don't. We give them 2 seconds and they go, I was talking to you. And we're like, right away. We want it right away. So, I saw a comment
one of
there.
the guys said, I wish people would give me 16 seconds.
Yeah, totally. I know. Well, even when my wife will say something or my kids say something, and I'm like, oh, just a second,
Yeah.
Sometimes it was funny though. The other day, my daughter who's 5, she's, I said something and she goes, just a minute, Dad.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, totally. So we don't repeat ourselves. We go back to step 1 now, and step 3. Or the third thing is use fewer words when you're talking to your children.
Right.
So if you're trying to communicate with them, you try to be very, very to the point. And the list I'm giving is more for younger children, so toddler, small child, probably 7 and under, something like that.
Right.
So you using fewer words so that they can comprehend what it is that you're talking about.
Right.
Like, let's say you wanted them to bring the plate from the table to the kitchen, or to the kitchen.
Yeah.
You don't say, hey, listen, it's dinner time's over and I want you to bring the plate. You just say, plate, kitchen. I mean, literally, that's all you need is, if that's what you're doing.
I love it because it's like really straight to
caveman.
the point. Yeah,
it's total caveman talk. Yeah.
Can I grunt and get my point across?
Totally. So I think that's it. The next item was, see it from their point of view.
Right.
So, you're using fewer words. You also want to put yourself in their shoes. I mean, I think we talked about this last time.
The empathy thing.
The empathy thing.
Yeah.
My child comes home from school. They are. Did you just join?
No, there's another Alan Bush. I think I know him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think we're friends on Twitter. Funny enough. There's a guy named Alan Bush who joined. Thank you, Alan, for joining. And he has the same name as me.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I think we're like friends on that.
Are you Alan H, though?
Yeah. We probably have different middle names, but it's pretty hilarious.
That is cool. I wish I was friends with the Jason Kreidman. So, you see it from their point of view. Like you said, you have empathy, but also, really understanding. Like, I think the example we used last week was that, the child comes home from school and says, I had to sit alone at lunch, and you're like, so what? Like in our world, that's just not that big of a deal.
Right.
But in their world, to a smaller child, it's a
their
huge
whole world.
Absolutely. It's a huge deal. It's their whole world.
Yeah.
And so we have to, if we're going to communicate with our children, we've got to give them that empathy and saying like, hey, listen, I understand what you're going through. And so you don't minimize it or make it smaller or whatever.
Well, time and experiences get exponentially shorter as you get older. Because when you're a kid, an hour seems like forever. You ever been in a car just driving like,
Right.
an hour. It's taking forever. But like now, I'm like, an hour goes by like that.
But guess what? That changes as you're single and then you're married with kids as well. In the fact that if I get 10 minutes of quiet, it's like,
that's like gold.
Well, actually, wives or moms would say
Sure.
more. I mean, like when they're, breastfeeding and they're doing this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 minutes of alone time. My wife would always say, it's like, I just want to go to the bathroom. Like, just go to the bathroom by myself. That's the time changes. Like, and somebody will say like, oh, I've got like an hour to kill. I mean, like if I have an hour to kill, man, I mean, there's, that's a lot of time.
Yeah. I guess.
Just like we talked about when I came in here, like the amount of things I came, full work day, straight from, we have a meetup here locally in Encinitas, so for an hour and a half, and ran in from the conference room over back into this room. I didn't even get a chance to eat anything as we, launched the podcast. So, but that's life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I roll.
Every second is full.
Yeah, it's like, when's that break? My head will hit the pillow hard, tonight.
Yeah, right.
But this stuff is fun. It's it's energizing. So you want to see it from their point of view. And then the next thing she said was engage cooperation. Mm-hmm. So essentially that means give them choices. You're cooperating and giving them the choice, getting them involved in the decision making if there is such. We talk about that too, where the kid needs to go upstairs,
right,
and you're communicating with them and you're giving them an option. You're saying, well, do you want to go upstairs fast or slow? It's not, do you want to go upstairs or not?
No, right.
It's which way do you want to go upstairs? And you learn that with small children too, especially of giving them choices, because they feel empowered to be able to make those choices.
Yeah.
That's something that they want to make a choice. They want to be in control. And so by you giving them a choice, they have the opportunity to do that.
Right.
This is a huge one. This is the next one.
Okay.
Is to stay calm and take a deep breath.
Yes.
So if you're going to communicate and want to communicate with your children, being, very high strung or very worked up, it's not going to happen.
Right.
They are, and this comes up in many cases, they're going to feed off of you and model your behavior.
Yeah.
So, if you're worked up and you're, too crazy, they're going to be that crazy too.
Yeah.
And that's why you notice, like, people who are really mellow often have mellow kids. I don't. My kids are not mellow. They don't just.
She's not exactly a mellow guy.
No, I'm not. I'm not a mellow guy. But it's funny. And that's like, I have friends that are, and they're very mellow, and it's like the kids are just like whatever.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of so stay calm, take a deep breath, and sort of create that atmosphere.
Yeah.
The next one is set up routines. So you want to set up a routine. We talk about this all the time. So, how do you get your child to listen to what you're trying to communicate? Mm-hmm. Well, part of it is a routine. If you're trying to talk to them and communicate to them about like getting ready in the morning, well, what do we talk about? Make a routine out of it.
Yeah.
Make a list, make a time, the timestamps, do all that stuff. So that's important to do.
Sure.
And then the last part, which takes it back to the first, is to listen.
Right. It's kind of a sandwich of listening.
Right. Which I feel I need to do more. A lot more. In fact, even in this podcast, I was noticing we sometimes review our podcasts, and I was saying like, just of listening more. I have all this stuff in my head, and I want to get it out.
Sure.
And I don't think then I listen. And that would be to you. It could be to the guests. It could be whatever. I'm thinking about the next thing that I'm going to say, and I want to get out versus being engaged, directly. That's a criticism of myself.
Sure.
But that's an important thing when you're talking to people, is to really, that they want to feel like you're listening to them. I mean, that's the battle.
Well, and I imagine that with kids, it's even harder because they're trying to communicate in a way that you kind of understand where they're going with it, or you need to really tell them not to do something or whatever it is, and you need to get that across.
Right.
And all of a sudden they're not, and you're like, okay, I get it, but stop doing this, or please not do that. Or
no, totally. No. So, I mean, it's really, really important for you to listen and for them to hear you. Mm-hmm. Or for you to hear them,
right?
To do that. So it brings it sort of all full circle.
Yeah.
That what is important when you want to get your child to listen to you.
Right.
So, going back and sort of talking about these things, a lot of this is setting the environment. Mm-hmm. Making it, and then having intention and really engaging them, being empathetic, staying calm. I mean, it's all these things that you think about, but when you're trying to communicate, you really just want to get your point across.
Right. Yeah.
Like you're not thinking about it from their perspective.
Right.
Like, what does my child need right now in order to be receptive to what I'm trying to say?
Right.
You know, and that it's funny. I feel like I had a lot of practice in that in the workspace, you know, because that's essentially what you do as a manager. You know, if you're a manager, you are trying, you know that you need to get your point across, or that you need to raise somebody else up, or you know what your purpose that you're trying to accomplish, and so you have to affect the situation that way so that you can get what you need out of it. You know, whether it is to make someone better or to discipline or whatever it is. So it kind of goes along to, it goes along with that. So.
Sure. Yeah, and I've been a director as well and managed teams and stuff and that's one of the biggest things you have to learn is to communicate effectively, stay calm.
Right.
You can't yelling
take it personally.
You can't take things personally is the other thing too. Like, when someone gets mad or they're doing something, you don't take it personally. I've learned that
So going on the subject of listening, so what I did is I then turned the listening. I have a couple things here. So that was really, how to get your child to listen. Mm-hmm. So this one is really from the parent side, how to listen responsibly for yourself. Oh, okay. So how do we now be able to listen? So it's not like what we're trying to get our child to do.
Right.
But now it's like, how do we get them the ability for the parents to listen? I'm getting it confused.
Yeah, right.
So
turn that around.
Right. So basically, listening responsibly is what it's called. Mm. It involves, and here's an example. So there was a ton of them, but I just took a couple of them. It involves being silent and listening to the entire explanation.
Okay.
So when a child comes to you and says, "Hey, blah, 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 whatever," I know already I've cut my son off and my daughter because I don't want to hear it. Let's this, that whatever it's called.
Point blank.
Yeah, you're just like, I don't want to hear it. Like that's like what. That's in
excuses,
right? That's in a situation where they might get in trouble, or or not in trouble, but we have a discussion. They did something, whatever.
And they're trying to delay.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to communicate with me about his day. I'm not cutting him off.
Right.
Even though I'm a conversation hijacker, I try not to do that with my son. But yeah, so I definitely, being silent and being cognizant of that is really, really important. Yeah. So allowing whoever, the child, to really just explain what it is that they're trying to communicate. So you can't really assume, and I find this too with a spouse, with my wife, where she'll start a story or do something, and I'll immediately cut in asking a question versus just like letting her explain it.
Right.
Right. Although I have said with men and women need to just tell us the end first. I just did that today with my assistant.
And then we'll Tarantino it back and try
totally.
to figure it out.
Tell me the end first. Oh, well, she died. Okay. Now tell me the whole story about how she
what
died.
happened in between that?
Right. So, being silent is important, but what it doesn't involve, what listening responsibly doesn't involve, is interrupting, formulating your response while the other person is talking. So that's something, because that's not truly listening. Yeah. And so I know that I do that because you can't listen really well while you're talking.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I have a friend that I would watch movies with. It's a guy named Chris, and I'm calling him out.
You're calling him out?
Calling him out, but I don't
Chris,
think
if you're listening
right now. Yeah, but he would ask questions during the movie, even if we both had seen it at the same time. And I'm going, I didn't get here before you. Why are you asking me the questions? Listen to what's going on. I'm just as new to this as you are.
Right. Awesome. So
that's funny.
Okay, so then, so we're talking about listening responsibly. So the next thing is creating a warm atmosphere for talking. Okay. So when you're talking to your kids, you really want to make sure you choose a good time. A good time to talk, and that's a good time for you and them.
Sure.
When I come home from work, probably not the best time to have that kind of conversation.
Right.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
Like for my kids, I already know the best time to have that conversation with them is at breakfast.
Oh,
my kids are alert.
Yep.
They're listening.
Yeah.
Anything after 5:00.
Yeah.
No parenting can happen. They're not listening. They're tired from their day. I mean, it's not going to work.
Right.
So,
and you're tired as well.
I'm tired as well. Yeah. And so those, even though, yes, we might have some interesting talks at bedtime, it's not a time to absorb and really talk about something serious for my children.
Right.
For my children, I know, at least, already, I know that I can get them in the mornings, and I'll probably be more effective that way.
Right.
So you have to do it, a time that's good for both of you. I'm not necessarily, I'm up in the morning early. So, I mean, it's usually after I get back from the gym or something like that.
Sure.
I have energy, they have energy, and it's a good talk.
Right.
And in fact, that's something that came up because like we had a discipline situation, or not a discipline, but a situation that happened at school. And we didn't talk about it right after school.
Okay. So now
let them decompress.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Like the normal thing would have probably been for me to be like, why didn't you
Let's
do,
address this
whatever,
right
address
now.
the issue right away.
Right.
And instead, my wife and I talked about it, and we said, you know what? We both agreed. It's like, let's just let them play, decompress. We'll deal with it in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm like you. I kind of want to get it out right now, but at the same time, I had to learn in previous relationships, even that I've been in, that sometimes they're not ready to talk about it,
right?
And me pressing it is making it worse. Mm-hmm. So let them
Timing's
stew
important.
in it. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes we need to address it immediately, but this time it's like, hey, let them think about it for a while, and then we can talk when they're ready. Yeah,
right. So once again, for those who just joined us, we are recording live on Blab this as well, but we do a weekly podcast called Dudes to Dads. I'm Jason Kreidman, and
I am Alan Bush.
And if you have questions, you certainly can write them into the Blab console there. I don't know what you would call it. The other would be if you're listening via podcast, which is most of our listeners.
Yeah.
Podcast at dudestodads.com.
Yeah.
Also Twitter.
Yeah.
At Dudes to Dads. Facebook, Dudes to Dads.
That's right.
And all the other social handles that might exist. Also, too, we do always appreciate reviews. We are in iTunes and Stitcher.
Yep.
And so reviews and comments and feedback is always welcomed. And we appreciate that. So that kind of helps us, not only shape things, but gets more listeners.
Yeah, it does. Go to iTunes and leave it like a 5-star review, or just
Absolutely.
It doesn't even have to be anything specific. Just tell us that you like it, what you don't like.
In case your friends do the same.
Yes, exactly. Tell a friend, everyone.
Right. So the good part about this thing too is we don't edit it, because it's live. There's really no editing. So me hitting the microphone or something like that, that always happens where I drop something, whatever. So far, everything's been okay. Everything's been okay. Knock on some sort of wood. So the last thing I was talking about, we were talking about listen responsibly and how to do that. So creating an atmosphere in the time about talking, picking a good time to do that.
Right.
So
you mentioned a place too, Like that's a good point too. Like you don't want to bring them in the middle of a mall and start talking about these things, or do you?
Well, you can. In fact, there's I have a thing that's a little bit later, but because kids respond differently. Let's say this is going to work for a little bit older kids, like a teenager.
Sure.
A teenager does not want to talk.
Right.
In most cases. Some do, a lot of them don't.
Yeah.
It may require you to go do an activity or something.
Yeah.
Hey, let's, like if it was, your son, maybe you share in something that you guys both like. If it was your daughter, you could take her and doing something that she really, they might be then more inclined to talk.
Comedian Bill Burr had a bit. He's like, I think I'll be a good dad. I just go out and play catch with them. Tell them about fill their head with my theories.
Right.
just play catch with them.
Not all of them want to play catch.
Well, right. Yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, that's one of those things that.
In fact, in our meetup, we just had our meetup earlier. Somebody was talking about that because he really was interested in his kid playing sports.
Yeah.
His son. And his son's not taking to sports as he wish.
Right.
And so we were talking about that. It's like, okay, well, if you want to talk to your kid and you want to engage with them, pushing them into that sport, how is that going to be positive or negative? And we were going through all that. It was a really interesting discussion because, everybody in the room kind of agreed. We've all sort of pushed our kids a little bit into areas that they might know. And some of it's okay because you're trying to get them to try stuff when they're younger. But at the same time, it's like, we may love sports. We may love something or, some sort of activity or habit or whatever, or craft or something. And we want our children to love it.
There's a difference between encouraging and pushing them into it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and they may not like it. It's like they're not into the sports or something like that. So, and so the attempt to try to engage with the child and be like, hey, let's go outside and throw the ball. And the child's like, I don't like to throw the ball. I'd rather go play with Legos, or something. They like using their hands. So we were saying that if you want to do that, you're going to have to figure out what they like. So,
right.
Another one which we talked about sort of in the other list was relaxing.
Yeah.
And responding to them in sort of a calm and
peaceful demeanor.
And the truth is like, if you're coming at them that way, they're more likely to come at you that way.
Right.
And I notice that with my kids. I mean, if they get worked up really high, I have a tendency to try to back down really quick and be very calm.
Yeah.
It's weird, it's a weird thing, but it's like I've noticed that that can help, where I'm just like, hey, listen, I'm sorry you're upset right now, and it's not going to feed them, because it's going to feed them even more. And so, that's something that you're going to want to do as far as relaxing.
That's interesting. I remember I learned this from myself as well, because we were getting hyped up about a conversation, and my ex-roommate at the time in college, he would go, okay. He would whisper it, and it made me feel like, okay, yeah, I guess I'm being loud. It just shut me down without even yelling over me. He just shut me down. So I was like, oh, that's smart. Yeah. That's a clever way to get me to shut up.
Lots of ways work. Lots of ways work.
That's funny.
And the thing that wouldn't be good, that not doing it responsibly, would be displaying tension, disapproval, hostility. And you got to remember too, it's not only in what you're saying, but it's your face and body expressions.
Yeah.
So imagine, I think 55% or whatever it is of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah.
If not more.
Yeah.
There's various studies that imagine, how you're feeling in that expression, whether it's in your face and you're mad, or that you're relaxed and that's going to really have an effect.
It does. I have a comment from a blabber. How do you call it? A blabite? You call those things. So basically, the exception on forcing our kids into something absolutely had to take my son to Beaver Stadium before my father-in-law took him to Notre Dame.
Awesome.
He's 3, and we were at Penn State last weekend. Mission accomplished.
Yeah, that's good. Well, you had to one up.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing wrong with little sportsmanship amongst,
no, that's great. We appreciate the feedback and the input. So it's good to have you guys here.
Awesome.
This is new for us too. So we're we do this podcast, but then it's really nice to have sort of the live interaction with people and getting some live feedback.
Yeah.
It occasionally will throw us off because we're not used to that, but I really like it.
Jason and I are used to just talking to each other.
Well, that's why I'm looking not at the camera, because I'm actually looking at Alan.
I'm fielding the questions.
I when I'm talking, I like to have the conversation.
Yeah.
That's how it's easier for me, rather than like looking at a microphone or something.
Sure.
I'm looking at Alan.
Yeah.
So because we're in the same room, so it's kind of funny. So then we're talking about the listen responsibly. The other thing is drawing out solutions from your child. So you're asking them the questions. So, that's something that I try to do by saying, so how did that feel? Or, what'd you think about that? Or, hey, would this work for you? Or that kind of thing, rather than lecturing, moralizing, fixing, whatever. My son or daughter might come to me with an issue, instead of me just saying, oh, well, here's what you got to do, kid.
Do it like this here, kid.
Yeah, I mean, instead of doing that, you just have, you've got to sort of understand their perspective and allow them to talk. So I think it's really important.
Yeah.
So then the next thing for listening responsibly is allowing for the complete expression of the feeling. So not only allowing them to talk, but allow them to feel. That's one of the things too. We actually had this talk today as well.
Sure.
That one of the other dads has siblings that will fight each other, and if you can't just say you're not allowed to feel anger,
right?
You just can't. I mean, especially a young child who's really has emotion. So you got to figure out ways to get that out and allowing them. So whether it's grabbing their shirt instead of hitting, or whatever, grabbing their own shirt, doing something like that, then instead of you have to allow them to feel, and giving permission to feel.
Yeah.
That's something, for those who have listened to the podcast, Dr. Ellen Kreidman, my mother's stuff, she, had talked a lot about feeling. She had a thing, one of the tapes, dating myself again, the audio are called Feelings Just Are.
Right.
But it's allowing you to have those feelings, and especially when you have a spouse or whatever, really allowing them to feel what they're feeling, and don't put that down, don't cut it off, don't do anything like that. So
Right.
so I think those are just some tips about, because we talked about how important listening is, you
Yeah.
know, and I think the listening is really something that we don't do very well.
Yeah.
Well, I put we, meaning myself. You might listen wonderfully or be a great listener, but I'm working on that, and I think that's partly. I think my kids and the people in my family would probably appreciate that.
Sure.
To do that. So for those of you just joining us, we are on a live blab of the Dudes to Dads podcast. Dudes to Dads is a podcast where we help single dudes become family men. We do get female listeners who like to listen in on kind of the dad's perspective, but this really is about the dads. And we talk about parenting, we talk about relationships, we give advice, we give tips, and then we also learn ourselves.
Absolutely.
And this kind of started, the Dudes to Dads concept started out of a meetup group, if you're familiar with Meetup, here in North San Diego, which I started about 2.5 years ago.
Right.
I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In fact, we just had one tonight, and then we're recording after that. So I have that motivation. I've been talking to the guys for an hour and a half, and we had all kinds of subjects going on. And the dads meet and talk about some things that are going on in their lives. And talking from experience is always helpful. It's not preaching, it's not doing that. It's really talking about experience. So there's people of all different ages, and that's what's really cool is that there's some people that will come to these meetups or even listen to the podcast or whatever, that actually have the perspective. They think that they're coming to get help or get assistance, and in reality, they end up helping other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just, hey, I went through that myself, or I've experienced that. So it's really, really cool to see that. And now to bring it, to a wider audience through the podcast, and then now through Blab, it's pretty cool.
Right.
So tonight's topic, we're talking about, being able to communicate. Dads being able to communicate with their kids. We've offered some tips. What we do too is on the podcast, if you don't catch this live, is on the podcast page on our website, we do put summaries of what we talk about. And so if there's links or anything that you missed to some of the articles that I talk about or such, we'll make sure that we put those on there.
Is the comment section open for those?
I'd have to look.
Yeah,
I'll have to talk to the webmaster. Oh, that's me. I have to. Shoemakers' kids go shoeless.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or you can always leave comments in iTunes. We are in iTunes.
No,
Again,
absolutely.
not to keep
absolutely
belaboring that point.
So, no, that's totally cool. Okay, so there was an article from the National Center of Fathering, and but this article was talking just specifically about dads and sons communicating. It wasn't, it was sort of in general. One of the tips was to get your son to talk. Don't try to get him to talk.
Right. Don't want to force them.
No. And what's that saying is, work on a project, do something fun, if they like something outdoors. And then once they're engaged with that, you can maybe bring up a topic and try to chat that way.
Right.
So that was something that, was suggested.
Where's the National Center of Fathering?
I don't necessarily know that it's a facility. It could be a facility, but
like
it's just
a nebulous cloud entity.
Yeah, well, it's a nonprofit, I believe, like just does studies and things like that
gotcha.
about fathering, and then and pushes to improve the cause,
right,
so to speak.
Right.
The other is watch for cues that he's ready to talk. So. Maybe there's certain times of the day, like I talked about, my kids are more inclined to talk in the morning.
Right.
And that kind of thing. Cues may be subtle, but you want to learn to spot them and understand sort of what, the kids prefer.
Goes back to that empathy thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Absolutely. Be available no matter what time. So if your kid it's in the middle of the night, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Be available. They need you, be available.
Right.
You're not going to turn them down, especially if you're having communication issues. You're not going to want to turn them down.
Right, yeah.
It really wouldn't make sense.
Kind of shuts down communications.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense to them. And then the last one was affirm him verbally. So, which, a lot of men don't do as well as probably the moms.
Right.
But that's just, saying I love you. It's, I'm proud to be your dad, that kind of stuff. And those affirmations. We also talk about touch.
Yeah.
They're going to feel closer to you if you are, doing that kind of thing. So,
right.
Physical touch is important. And so, being close to them, not only, affirming them and doing that and being loving, it's going to really help. So, Okay, so that was with the National Center of Fathering. So I had 10 more tips that are somewhat related on the other ones, but this was from All Pro Dad, which is a big organization through professional sports, I think through the NFL.
Oh, no kidding.
Or something, and they had an article, 10 tips for communicating with kids as well. So I'm taking a lot of this from different places, but I'm seeing the same, it's the same stuff.
Trends, yeah, exactly. And they're all good stuff, right?
Yeah. First one was breaking bread or having a meal.
Breaking bread.
We talked about this, about having a meal, and the fact is they're going to connect with your children. Connecting, communicating is very similar. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's you need to connect in order to communicate.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So eating 2 to 3 meals a week, together as a family or just, with your children is going to be really important. Mm-hmm. Another suggestion is when, you're in the car, instead of listening to music or playing games, it's like, that's a place to talk. Which I don't know if I totally agree with that one.
Because you're in the middle of driving.
But I've also heard the opposite. Like when my kids, I'm taking them to school. I take them to school a couple days in a week.
Right.
The other tip is that if your kids don't want to talk, don't force them to talk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It might be that, like, especially after school, if they're like too energetic, they may not. That's like, it's the last thing they want to do is sit there and talk to you.
Yeah.
You might not be but once again, you've got to know your child.
Exactly. Some people might be apt to talk.
Right. You've got to know your child.
Right.
So that's just an opportunity that if it could work for you, instead of, listening to your phone, listening to your music or your child playing a game, to do that.
Right.
The one that we talked about ad nauseum earlier was listening, but also paying attention to their body language and that kind of stuff. So,
right.
That's a big deal. The other is one-on-one. As a family, we do a lot of stuff. My family, what I'm talking about, but and I have 2 kids. So my wife and then 2 kids and stuff. So that's why I've done these camping trips and some of these other things where I actually get the chance to spend one-on-one time with my kid. And I think that's really, really important. The one-on-one time, it is unique. You get a chance to really connect, and then at that time you can possibly have better communication and the closeness to do that. So I think that's cool and that works. The 5th one is walk in their shoes. So we talked about this about connecting too.
Right.
Educate on the things that they're dealing with. If it's a little bit of an older child, peer pressure, drugs, alcohol, dating, school, whatever, you got to kind of know what's going on, but also stay current, know what they're using, the devices, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that goes into the next one, which is number 6, which is texting. So they actually are recommending, hey, you can send a short text to your kid, make it short. Do not lecture. Don't be annoying. Don't do it too many times. Whatever. Just keep it short.
40 texts in a row.
Yeah,
basically a paragraph.
You just like saying, "Hey, hope everything's good. You had a good day." Whatever. Short and stuff. The other one is the right approach, and so it really was just saying that all kids are different. Which we've already sort of covered. Personality and needs are different. Some need firmness. Others are gentle touch. They're not going to respond if you're really strong with them. Right. Number 8 is get off their back. Just basically get off their back. Conversations that are sort of dominated by you correcting them or lecturing or whatever, it's gonna just drop their self-confidence. Yeah. It's gonna, they're gonna shut you out.
That makes sense.
And choose the right moment. So give them, and also here, this is a big one. Give them room to make, this is still part of this one, give them room to make mistakes.
Right.
Allow them to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And we try to do that with my kids and saying, hey, it's okay to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not getting in trouble for making a mistake, but it's like, can you fix it? Can you make it better? What can you do? Especially if you hurt somebody or...
Yeah, or had an accident with something.
But stuff's going to happen.
Dropped something or whatever, yeah.
And that's something that it's interesting. So, the next thing is open your book, which has to do, to me, with mistakes. Tell them about your wins and losses, the good and the bad. I have shared with my children, some mistakes that I've made or have done. And part of that is it's okay to see the imperfections. When they were first born or they were younger, before I sort of went to classes and things like that, I was always thinking like I had to be perfect for them. Right. But the truth is like that puts a lot of pressure on both them and myself. Mm-hmm. And so it's okay for them to see the imperfections, and if anything, to see then how you overcome them or how you deal with stuff. So even an argument, like if I was to argue with my wife, of course I never argue.
Of course not.
No, we have discussions.
They're just
but
very loud.
But and I agree to a certain extent. You don't want the kids. But people will hide it.
Yeah.
Per se. But I think what's important that my kids will see is they'll see us talk it out and talk through it and say, hey, okay, listen, we're upset with each other right now because of this, and this, but then we're okay.
Yeah.
And we talked about it. And hey, I listened to you, you listened to me, and they watch you solve the problem. And I think that's a really, really important thing.
And it also they can emulate that later in their own relationships.
Right.
Yeah.
Which when you open your book, the last one is be an open door.
Mm-hmm.
So, be yourself, be relaxed, be open, know that your door is always open and that your life is open to them. And so that, they feel love and trust and those kinds of things to really communicate with you.
Right.
So that's really, the gist of it. There was one item that was sort of just an added that I came across was misbehavior is a form of communication.
So, okay, that's a good point. Because, they're acting up for a reason.
Right. We talk about all these things about communication and everything, and know that, something's not going on right in your child's life for them. And it's funny, when we are off or cranky or whatever, we call it stressed.
Yeah.
For a kid, we call it misbehaving.
Right.
The truth is that they're stressed too.
Yeah.
And so understanding that, they're not necessarily bad. So if you can look at that kind of behavior as that they are stressed out, you're going to start to look at it different and probably treat it differently.
Right.
And so I think that's something that's important to, just to consider. So
sure.
So for those of you who stuck with us, Max.
Yeah, I saw that.
Hey, good to join us, Max. The fact that we're done, but we appreciate you joining us on Blab.
Yeah.
Max is one of our members.
Yeah,
who we enjoy. The group who we enjoy having, and always bringing light to the situation. So we enjoy that. But so for those of you who just joined us, I apologize because this is pretty much over. But at the same time, we will be doing this again. Probably need to fix our technical difficulties because we probably had 45 minutes of technical difficulties.
No, almost. But you know what? It just live and learn, and I think we got it down. So
okay, we'll just have to write it down and take a snapshot.
Yeah.
So, but for those of you on the podcast, thank you once again. Any questions, comments? Once again, podcast at dudestodads.com. Twitter, Dudes to Dads, Facebook, also giving us a rating in Stitcher and iTunes.
Especially iTunes. Go to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review if you can, and leave a comment if you can. If not, just don't have to say anything. You put a period. Be done.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll be able to do this again with a little less things. But with that, we'll see you next week, Alan.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Take care.
Take care, guys.
Goodbye, everybody.